Hey everybody, good morning. Today is Tuesday, May 12th. Listen, I wanted to jump in right away and start talking about your last assignment for me. You're going to be giving me a presentation that you're going to videotape. Talked a little bit about it in yesterday's video, so let's jump in, okay? First of all, you're going to notice that I've got a folder for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Because once I give you this assignment today, you're just going to have work time for the rest of the week. So I just combined those folders. And then your final assessment is in Friday's folder. So when you open up this folder for Tuesday through Thursday, you're going to see I've got 3 PDFs here, and then I've got a link to a Zoom meeting on Wednesday, May 13th. That Zoom meeting is actually, you know what, as I talk, I'm going to edit this so that I can include the time. The Zoom meeting is going to be from 10:30 to 11 a.m. on that Wednesday, because I have a feeling some of you guys are going to have questions for me, and you can always email me, and I'm happy to answer questions via email, but sometimes it's just a little bit nicer to talk face to face and get your questions answered. So I wanted to make sure that I had a meeting set up for that, so don't forget to come to that if you've got any questions. Let's jump in real quick. Take a look at this first PDF. It's Designing Solutions, a Community Action Plan. And this is just kind of a rough overview of what the assignment is, and then I want to talk a little bit about working with partners, like I mentioned yesterday. So your objective is, you guys have been researching invasive species. Okay, and so you're going to come up with a plan, a community action plan, and you've got 2 criteria. You can choose one or the other, or both, it's fine, but your plan must halt or stop the spread of the invasive species in Nebraska, or completely reduce the populations in the region of Nebraska. Those are 2 very different things, and so I'm going to allow you guys to choose which one you want to focus on. Now, I mentioned that you're able to work with a partner. If you watched the video from Monday, you know that it's okay if you choose somebody who is not in your same class period, but I absolutely will not allow groups of 3 or more. So, and then as always, you can always work individually if you'd like. Now, if you are working with a partner, a couple of things you want to think about while you're starting to plan your presentation. You will only need to create a plan for one species. So if you did research the same invasive species that your partner did for the wanted poster, just talk between the 2 of you and decide which one you want to move forward with, and just move forward with that one, and that's fine. Both of you need to appear on the video presentation. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And both of you need to submit the video presentation individually for grading. So you're going to have to make a copy so you both have it. Okay? So your presentation is this. Instead of having a class presentation, because that's impossible, we can't do that, obviously, with e-learning, you guys are going to record yourselves, and instead of talking to me, Mrs. Clayton, as your audience, I want you to imagine that you are sharing your action plan with community members at a town hall meeting, okay? Again, if you are working with a partner, both partners need to be in the video. And you can Zoom yourselves, record a Zoom session between the 2 of you. That way you can share your screen. And then I can talk to you on Wednesday about how to save that and then submit that into me. You may want to go ahead and record yourself separately and then put everything together in iMovie, or you can use a screen sharing app like FaceTime to record yourselves presenting together. I'm going to let you guys be a little bit creative with that, and then like I said, we can talk more about it on Wednesday if you've got problems or we need to do some more brainstorming. Second thing I want to let you guys know about is using visual graphics. If you would like to use visuals, you may. However, I am not requiring this because I'm not sure how much difficulty you guys are going to have, especially if you're working with a partner, in presenting information and then submitting it to me. I know the more information you have, the more like memory it's going to, I don't want it to be a bigger deal than what it is. Okay. However, if you would like to include visuals, that'll make it a little bit more interesting for sure. And that would bump up your grade from just proficient to advanced. If you decide that you want to use visuals, you still have to include your face. I know some of you guys are thinking, oh, cool, I'll go ahead and make a PowerPoint or a Google slide, and then I'll just read off of those. And I don't want you to do that. This is like a presentation. I'm a member of a community, and I want to see you. I want to look at your facial expressions. I want to, you're talking to me. Your time limit for this presentation is 3 to 5 minutes, and it's due Friday, May 15th. Let's go ahead and jump to an organizer that I made for you. Now, you guys do not need to use this if you don't want to, but listen, I wanted to make your lives easier and I didn't want to stress you out. And so I created this graphic organizer, and it has everything in there that I want you to include in your presentation. And you can do with this what you want. If you want to print it out and write on it and then literally use it during your presentation instead of making note cards or anything like that, then do it. I'm happy for you to do that. This is not language arts, and so I'm not requiring like a certain amount of of eye contact or gestures or anything like that. What we are is we're a group of scientists, we're a group of community members, we have a real life problem, and you as a scientist, you are going to help me solve my problem. So that's what I'm looking for in this presentation. If you decide you don't want to use this graphic organizer, that's fine. Still take into consideration the information that I'd like you to include, and then you can use whatever means you want to organize your speech. Okay, so I wrote the directions on here again, just because I want to make sure that you know what your focus or what the criteria is. You are going to create an action plan for your community to address the problem of the invasive species that you researched for your wanted poster. Your plan must either halt the spread of the invasive species, so either the Asian jumping worm or the zebra mussel, or it's going to decrease its population in the region. And those are two very different things, and so decide which one you want to focus on. If you'd like to do both of them, that's fine. It's not required. The criteria for your presentation is that your plan must include the following information in the order that I have organized it. And again, if you don't want to use this graphic organizer, you don't have to, but I tried to make it as easy for you guys to organize your speech as I could. So in this first box, you've got your introduction. I want you to address your audience because there are members of a specific community. And so I want you to say something like, good evening or good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to Carter Lake. Thank you for inviting me to Lincoln, Nebraska. You decide based on your research for your invasive species, where is that taking place in Nebraska? Now, some of you guys included maps on your wanted posters that indicated that basically all of Nebraska was affected. If that's the case, then you just choose someplace in Nebraska that it's evident, and make sure that you include that. And then I want you to just jump right in and introduce your invasive species. So hello, thank you for inviting me to Carter Lake. I'm here to talk about the zebra mussel problem that we have. Something really short, simple, direct, okay? In this introduction, you need to kind of tell me how this invasive species has impacted Nebraska's ecosystem. Zebra mussels are a problem because, and then give me some reasons why. Remember to cite your source. You guys have the website that I gave you, and then any other websites that you guys use to get your information for your wanted poster. You've already done the work here. You don't need to do a whole lot more unless you feel like you didn't do enough on your wanted poster. Once you've introduced your invasive species, then you're going to jump right away to the plan that you are going to make that is going to either eliminate your invasive species population or reduce the spread. And I forgot to write that on here, but one of those two criteria up here. So go ahead and describe the actions that the community members should take in order to solve the problems. And if your plan includes something in addition to community member action, then you need to explain that as well. Next, I want you to talk about what's the rationale for your plan. Why do you think that this plan in particular will be effective? And why is it important that we use this plan to solve the problem? And so maybe this is a plan that's working already in Michigan and you found that out during your research, and so you're going to say, hey, this is what they do over in Michigan. I think if we do it here, we're really going to see a decrease in population because according to, and cite your source and tell me why. Why is this going to work? The next thing I'd like you guys to talk to me about is some of the constraints or limitations of your plan. And remember to cite your source of evidence here. Now, I want you guys to recall back when we were making the incubators for the babies. We had 3 criteria, and not all 3 criteria were met. We did the best we could, but maybe a baby incubator that kept the baby warm at that temperature, 37 degrees Celsius, and maybe it stayed within the time or the temperature range for a good period of time, but maybe it costs too much. We still need to talk about the limitations of plans, because here's the thing, you guys, as scientists, your plans may not always be perfect. In fact, they most likely won't be perfect. But a good scientist is able to look at a plan and evaluate the plan based on the constraints and then justify whether or not that plan is worth it, regardless of the constraints, okay? So there are 3 constraints that you need to include. I want you to include all 3 of these. Consider the scientific or ecological constraint or limitation. I want you to talk about the reality of the science and what it can and cannot do. If you're going to tell me that you would like you've got this special formula, this potion that you have invented and you would like us to sprinkle it on, that needs to be based on science. Sorry, you guys. I don't want your plans to be pie in the sky fantasies, okay? I want you may need to do a little bit more research here. But I want you to have your plans based on real science. If you say, hey, we're going to use these robots, these drones to locate the zebra mussels, or we've got technology that's going to read the vibrations in the earth, and that's where we know the Asian jumping worms are. Those are great ideas, but is there any basis for that that's already out there? I also want you guys to think about that the plan needs to meet the goal without causing additional disruptions to the ecosystem. So we can't drop a nuke in Carter Lake because that would be disruptive to the ecosystem. Think about social constraints or limitations. Remember, this is a community action plan, so your community members should have something that they should be doing to solve this problem. Maybe you want them to call a hotline. You're going to set up a phone number, and you're going to have your community members need to call and say, hey, we've got some zebra mussels out here, or I saw an Asian jumping worm out here, and then you need to dispatch somebody to go take care of that. So what's the likelihood that people are going to actually participate in that community plan? And if you don't think that they will, in other words, if this greatly disrupts everyday life, if you're asking people to go above and beyond what they normally would do, most likely people are not going to do it. So what's the motivation there? How can you help them overcome any kind of apathy that they might have towards that? Talk about make it their problem. Take into consideration the interests of those in the community, so as you develop your plan, you can maximize its effectiveness. Maybe we've got that hotline, or maybe you're going to set up checkpoints, and people who are boating, they need to check their motors to make sure no zebra mussels. They're not transporting zebra mussels from one lake one body of water to another. So that people who boat, they have fun doing that. And so make it worth their while. Make it, give them some kind of incentive. And then lastly, the third consideration that you need to think about is economic consideration. So consider the cost of your proposed plan and the source of funding. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay the person to pick up the phone and answer those phone calls for that hotline? Or who's going to pay the salary of the people if you have people going to Carter Lake, or like they're actually going out there and talking to community members and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. How are you going to pay for that? And you may even want to include ideas for how to fund your plan. Maybe somebody gets a fine, and if they don't do what they're supposed to do, and the fine goes towards paying salaries, whatever you want, okay? Finally, I have a conclusion. The conclusion is just basically 1 or 2 sentences where you're going to persuade your audience that despite some of the constraints or limitations, your plan is the best one for getting rid of whatever invasive species you chose, or preventing further populations from coming into Nebraska. So again, this whole thing should be about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not looking for anything longer than 5 minutes at all. Okay? All right, very quickly, let's jump back here. I want to show you the rubric. Jeez, I've got something in my throat, you guys. I'm so sorry. It's really gross. Okay, so here's the rubric. I divided it into 3 sections. First is the description of the invasive species and the description of the problem. This is the rationale for why it's important that we solve the problem. And then this is focusing just on your action plan itself. So a 3 is advanced, 2 is proficient, and then 1 and 0, you wouldn't get any credit for this at all. So let's just go ahead and look at at proficient. So your description of the problem, you would get proficient if you provide somewhat complete and specific information based on evidence. The difference between proficient and not is not including the evidence. And then you may not fully address the impact of the invasive species. Maybe you mention it, but it's not anything like really descriptive, whereas you don't include details at all down here for a 1. As far as the rationale for your plan, why is it important? A proficient person may include reasoning why it's important, and even kind of explain the connection between the invasive species and changes to the ecosystem in Nebraska, but maybe not super specific. But the person who doesn't get credit at all doesn't use any reasoning to connect the ideas. You're just giving me evidence, but there's no use of reasoning to explain the evidence. And maybe some of your information is not accurate. A proficient plan, action plan, means that the person provided some plan that is somewhat complete and specific. It may not fully address the strengths and weaknesses, but you did include those 3 constraints. The difference between a 2 and a 3 here is that this one is really strong. It gives a very specific step-by-step action plan. If you are scoring a 1 or a 0, you don't have a specific plan at all. You don't talk about addresses the strengths and the weaknesses, and maybe you only talk about 2 of those criteria. I want you to think about all 3, okay? And I think that's it. Please, you guys, let me know, email me, tell me if you've got any problems, questions, concerns, and I will let you guys have today to work. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we're going to Zoom, and if you guys have any questions, I can answer them then too. Okay? All right, you guys, good luck, have fun, and I'll talk to you soon.